AITA for reporting my wife's family after discovering my signature on her brother's loan? I'm Adriel, 39, and I had been married to Elena for almost 10 years when I learned that the most dangerous thing in my marriage wasn't another man. It was a signature I never gave. We have a 7-year-old daughter, Isla, who still puts tiny dinosaur stickers on anything she thinks looks boring. My coffee mug has 3 of them on the handle. Before that week, I would have said the biggest recurring arguments in our house were bedtime, bills, and Elena's family expecting me to step up whenever her younger brother Luca ran into trouble. Luca is 31, and for most of the time I've known him, he has been one good opportunity away from turning his life around. That's how his family always described it. One more job. One more loan. One more favor. One more chance to prove everyone wrong. And if the chance didn't work out, there was always a reason that had nothing to do with Luca. A manager didn't appreciate him. A roommate screwed him over. A car repair wiped him out. A friend backed out of a business idea. A bank didn't understand entrepreneurs. I didn't hate Luca. That's important. He could be funny. He was good with Isla. He would sit on the floor and let her put plastic bracelets on his wrists while he pretended they were expensive watches. When he was relaxed, he was easy to like. The problem was that liking Luca always seemed to come with an invoice. A few years into my marriage, he fell behind on a small debt after a stretch of unemployment. Elena was getting calls from her mother every night. Carmen would say things like, "Your brother is drowning while you sit comfortably," and "I hope one day you don't need family and discover no one comes." Elena cried after one of those calls, not because she thought Luca deserved the money, but because Carmen had a way of making no sound like betrayal. I paid the debt. It wasn't life-changing money. I could afford it. At the time, I thought I was buying peace. What I actually bought was precedent. After that, Luca needed help with a deposit, then a repair, then paperwork connected to a short-lived side business. That last one caused a problem because my name had been listed as a reference in a way I hadn't understood when I agreed to it. It didn't ruin my credit, but it took weeks of calls and documentation to straighten out. That was when I told Elena I was done putting my name on anything connected to Luca. She agreed immediately. Actually, she was angry on my behalf. She told me, "They don't get to touch your paperwork again." I mean it. I believed her. That promise is a big reason why what happened later hurt so much. Elena was never just Carmen's obedient daughter. For years, she was usually the one trying to soften the pressure from her family. If Carmen called me selfish, Elena would later say, "She shouldn't have said that." If Raphael tried to frame something as just helping out, Elena would privately tell me I was allowed to say no. Once, when Elena refused to give Luca money directly, Carmen told her she had forgotten blood. Elena sat at the edge of our bed afterward and cried so quietly I almost didn't realize she was crying. I remember sitting beside her and saying, "You can love them without letting them decide everything." She nodded. For a while, I thought she understood that better than anyone. But family pressure doesn't always disappear because someone recognizes it. Sometimes it just changes shape. Over the years, Elena stopped arguing with Carmen as much. She started translating her instead. Mom's scared for Luca. Dad already promised he'd help. They're getting older. Luca is trying this time. And I started compromising because compromise was easier than watching my wife get torn apart every time she disappointed them. That was my part in this. I didn't create their family dynamic, but I helped train everyone to expect that if they pushed long enough, I would eventually give something. The business idea started about 3 months before the 2:14 a.m. text. Luca wanted to buy a small food truck setup and some commercial equipment. Not a giant operation. Not some ridiculous $1 million dream. He had found used equipment, had worked out a rough business plan, and had apparently spent months telling everyone this would be his real fresh start. That phrase came up constantly. Fresh start. Carmen said it. Raphael said it. Luca said it. Even Elena started saying it. At first, I stayed out of it. Luca showed me pictures once and asked what I thought. I said, "If you can keep the overhead low, maybe it works." He grinned like I had endorsed the whole thing. A week later, Carmen asked Elena whether I still used the same signature on bank paperwork. I only heard half the conversation because Elena was in the kitchen and I was helping Isla with homework. I remember looking up because it was such a strange question. Elena said, "Mom, Why would you even ask that? Carmen answered something I couldn't hear. Elena lowered her voice. At the time, I assumed it had something to do with an old check or document. A few days later, Elena asked me to send her a scan of my ID. She said Isla's school needed updated household identification for some records. That wasn't completely unusual. Schools ask for all kinds of things, and Elena handled most of that paperwork. I texted it to her. Nothing about it felt dangerous. That's the part that bothered me later. People imagine financial betrayal looks like someone sneaking into your wallet at midnight. Sometimes it looks like your wife asking for a document while you're trying to get your kid to finish spelling words. The first time I felt something was off was at a family dinner. Carmen had invited us over. Luca was there, Raphael was there, and Elena's Aunt Beatrice stopped by later. Carmen had made enough food for twice the number of people present, which was usually how I knew she wanted everyone comfortable before asking for something. Luca spent most of the meal talking about the food truck. He had found equipment. He had a supplier. He had a location strategy. He had numbers. He had, according to him, finally done everything right. At one point he said, "The hard part is already handled." I asked, "What hard part?" He looked toward Raphael, then said, "Just getting everything lined up." Raphael changed the subject. After dinner, Carmen cleared the plates and Raphael put several pages on the table in front of me. I recognized the lender name, but I had never seen the documents. "What's this?" I asked. Raphael said, "The final paperwork." "For what?" "For Luca's financing." I looked at Luca. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked hopeful. Raphael tapped the signature section. "They just need a guarantor with a stronger profile." I pushed the pages back. "No." There was a pause. Not a dramatic one. Nobody gasped. Carmen kept stacking dishes for a few seconds like she hadn't heard me. Then she turned around. "You didn't even read it." "I don't need to." Luca leaned forward. "It's not like I'm asking you to give me the money. I understand what a guarantor is." Raphael said, "Then you understand it's only there because the lender wants security." "Yes, my security." Elena had gone red in the face. Not angry yet. Embarrassed. She said quietly, "Can we not do this like this?" I looked at her. "Did you know they were asking me to sign tonight?" "I knew they wanted to talk to you." "That's not what I asked." Carmen cut in. "It's not a handout. It's family investing in family." I told her, "If you want to invest, use your credit." That landed badly. Raphael leaned back and said, "We already have money in this." That was the first moment I should have asked what he meant. Instead, I assumed he meant they had helped Luca with startup costs. I said, "Then you should have discussed that before committing." Luca rubbed both hands over his face. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Treat me like everything I try is some future disaster." I kept my voice even. "I will help people move furniture. I will help with a ride. I will help with a meal. I will not attach my name to debt I don't control." Carmen said, "A husband who loves his wife doesn't make her beg for her family." I looked at Elena. She stared at the table. That bothered me more than Carmen's comment. Normally, Elena would have said something. Even if she disagreed with me, she would have told her mother not to drag our marriage into it. This time she said, "Adrielle, could you just read the terms?" "No." Her face changed. "Why are you making this so absolute?" "Because we already agreed my name wouldn't be involved with Luca's finances again." Carmen shook her head and muttered, "People never forget one mistake." Luca said, "You're holding old stuff against me forever." I answered, "I'm holding my own credit in my own hands." Raphael gave a tight laugh. "It's paperwork." I said, "Then you sign it." He didn't answer. We left 20 minutes later. Elena barely spoke in the car. Isla was in the back seat wearing headphones, watching something on her little screen, and for most of the drive, Elena stared out the passenger window. When we got home, she waited until Isla was in her room, and then said, "You humiliated me." I actually thought I had heard her wrong. "I humiliated you. You made my family look like they were trying to steal from you. They put guarantor papers in front of me without warning. They were asking. They were assuming." She folded her arms. "They knew you could help." There it was. Not "you should help." Not "it would mean a lot." You could. Like capacity created obligation. I said, Being able to carry someone's debt doesn't mean I should. Elena said, Luca is finally serious. I hope he succeeds. You don't sound like you do. What would make me sound supportive enough? Signing. She didn't answer. The argument didn't explode. That would almost have been easier. It just went cold. For the next 2 days, Elena treated me like I had committed some social offense she was waiting for me to recognize. Carmen called her constantly. Raphael left me a voicemail. Adrielle, paperwork is just paperwork. No one gets hurt if Luca makes the payments. Think about whether this is worth making a family issue. I saved the voicemail mostly because I was annoyed. At that point, I wasn't thinking about evidence. I was thinking about boundaries. Then Isla came into the kitchen while I was making her lunch and asked, Why are you making Uncle Lucas sad? I stopped spreading peanut butter. What? Mom said he might lose his truck because you won't help. I looked toward the hallway. Elena was standing there. She had heard the question. I said, That's grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Isla shrugged and started peeling one of her dinosaur stickers off a sheet. I waited until she left. Then I asked Elena, Why is she hearing about this? Elena said, I didn't tell her details. You told her enough to think I'm hurting your brother. She asked why we were arguing. So you gave her me as the answer. Elena exhaled sharply. You're acting like I poisoned her against you. I'm saying don't use our daughter as part of this. I didn't. Then keep her out of it. That was the first time I saw real anger in Elena's face. She said, You keep saying my credit, my signature, my boundary like we're not married. I said, Marriage doesn't turn my legal identity into a family resource. She grabbed her keys. I need space. I didn't stop her. She packed a small bag, got some clothes for Isla, and said they were going to Carmen's for the night. I asked Isla if she was okay. She said yes. I asked Elena to text me when they arrived. She gave me a look like I was being controlling. I said, I'm her father. I'm asking you to tell me she got there safely. She texted me 25 minutes later. For the first couple of hours, I assumed she really did just need space. Then I got an alert from my credit monitoring service. Hard inquiry. The lender name was the same one on Luca's papers. I stared at the notification long enough that my phone dimmed. I opened the alert. There had been an application-related inquiry connected to my identity. My first thought was that maybe the family dinner papers had triggered something preliminary. I told myself there could be an innocent explanation. Then I checked an old family email account. Years earlier, Elena and I had used one shared address for utilities, subscriptions, and household forms before we gradually moved most things to separate emails. I almost never looked at it anymore. There was a lender email sitting there. It had been sent before the family dinner. The subject line was some generic application confirmation language. I opened it. The message referenced a guarantor application under my name. I felt something in me go very still. Not panic. Not rage. Just still. I went back through the dates. The application activity had started before Raphael placed those papers in front of me. That meant the dinner wasn't the beginning of the request. It was supposed to be the final approval. I opened my text thread with Elena and typed, Did you submit anything to Luca's lender using my information? I watched the typing bubble appear. Disappear. Appear again. She sent, We need to talk in person. I replied, Did you submit anything using my information? No answer. At 12:47 a.m., she called. I answered. She said, You're spiraling. That was her first sentence. I said, Did you use my ID? Why are you looking through old emails in the middle of the night? That's not an answer. She said, Nothing is final unless you sign. I looked again at the lender email. Then why is there already an application under my name? She was quiet. I heard Carmen talking in the background. Then Elena said, I thought you would understand once it was real. That sentence changed the conversation. What did you send? I didn't submit a loan. What did you send? My mom needed documents to reserve the application. What documents? She asked for your ID. And, Adrielle. And, she lowered her voice. I sent an old scan. What old scan? You know the paperwork we used for the refinance stuff years ago? I knew. There had been a page with my signature scanned into our household records. I stood up from the kitchen table. Did you send my signature? I sent the page. I didn't think they would actually send it. I had no reply for a few seconds. She rushed into the silence. Mom said it was just to hold the file. Dad said you could still approve everything later. So you gave them my ID and a page with my signature. I thought you would eventually say yes. You knew I might say no. I knew you were going to react before you listened. I said, you knew I would say no, so you tried to make my no useless. She started crying then. Not loudly. I was trying to keep everyone from falling apart. I said, you sent my identity to people who were trying to put me on debt. They are my parents. That doesn't improve the sentence. She hung up. I didn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., the ultimatum came. Sign the guarantor papers by 9, or I'm taking our daughter and the account. I read it twice. The wording didn't sound entirely like Elena. It sounded like Elena after several hours at Carmen's house. That didn't excuse it. I typed back, then explain why your brother's loan already has my signature. This time she called immediately. I didn't answer. I took screenshots of the messages. I saved the credit alert. I downloaded the lender email. Then I found the lender's fraud and identity dispute contact information from the documents I already had and sent a written statement. I kept it simple. I said I had not agreed to act as guarantor, had not authorized anyone to submit an electronic signature on my behalf, and had reason to believe personal identification materials I had provided to my spouse for another purpose had been used in the application. I attached the credit inquiry alert and the application confirmation. I didn't accuse Carmen of forging anything specific because I didn't yet know exactly who had clicked what. I didn't accuse Luca of personally submitting it. I said one thing I knew for certain. I had not authorized it. Then I froze my credit. By 5:30, I had a reply acknowledging the dispute. By sunrise, the application was under review. At 6:08, Elena called. I answered this one. Her voice was low and furious. What did you do? I told the lender the truth. You didn't have to do that tonight. You gave me a deadline. You could have talked to me. I tried. You know what I mean. No, I don't. She said, they froze the whole application. I expected that. Luca is going to lose the equipment. That's between Luca and the lender. You're destroying his future to prove a point. I said, I didn't ruin a business. I interrupted a debt with my name on it. She made a sound like she was about to shout, then stopped herself. Mom doesn't know yet. That caught me off guard. What? She thinks there's a lender delay. So she doesn't know I reported the unauthorized application? No. Why are you telling me? Because if she finds out right now, everything is going to explode. I sat down. You mean if she finds out that I know? Elena didn't answer. Then she said, can I come home? That was the strangest moment of the entire night. Hours earlier, she had threatened to take our daughter and the account if I didn't sign. Now she wanted to come home before her parents found out the pressure campaign had triggered exactly the review they had been trying to avoid. I said, is Isla awake? No. Bring her home if you want. You and I aren't solving this before she gets breakfast. Elena said, so I can come? I said, for Isla, yes. That doesn't mean we're okay. She arrived around 7:30. Isla ran inside wearing mismatched socks and carrying a blanket. She hugged me like she had been gone a week. Elena came in behind her looking exhausted. I made breakfast. It felt absurdly normal. Toast. Cereal. A missing blue cup. Isla asking why the toaster always burned only one corner. Elena and I barely looked at each other. After Isla was settled in the living room, Elena followed me into the kitchen. She said, I need you not to call anyone else. I'm not calling your family. I mean the lender. I already gave them what they needed from me. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. No money has been paid out. That's not the point. It matters. It matters for damage. It doesn't change consent. She leaned against the counter. You're making this sound criminal. I'm describing what happened. My parents were trying to help Luca. You gave them my ID. I know. And my old signature. I know. And they used it in an application. I didn't know they would send it. But you knew why they wanted it. Her eyes filled again. I thought once you saw everything was already moving, you would just sign and we could stop fighting. I stared at her. You thought making it harder for me to say no would make this acceptable? I thought you were being stubborn. And now? She looked away. I think I made a mistake. I said, a mistake is sending the wrong attachment. She flinched. That was probably colder than I needed to be. I knew it as soon as I said it. But I didn't take it back. At around 9 o'clock, I checked our joint account. That was because of her text about taking the account. We used the account for mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, Isla's school lunch balance, her after-school fee, and most ordinary household expenses. The account wasn't empty. But a large amount had been transferred the previous evening to Carmen. Large enough that upcoming autopays would have been uncomfortably tight. The description was generic. I turned my phone toward Elena. What is this? She went pale. I moved it so you couldn't lock me out. You transferred joint money to your mother. For safekeeping. Safekeeping from me? I didn't know what you were going to do. You threatened to take the account after you had already moved money out of it. I was scared. How much did your mother tell you to move? She didn't tell me. Elena. She said you might freeze everything if you found out. So she did tell you. She said to protect myself. I looked at the amount again. You moved money we use for Isla's expenses to your mother to protect yourself from the consequences of using my identity. That's not fair. It's accurate. She said, you have your own paycheck. So do you. That's not the point. No. The point is we had a joint system based on trust, and you just proved I can't operate as if that trust exists. I logged into payroll and changed my direct deposit to an individual account I had kept open but rarely used. Then I moved part of the remaining joint balance into that account. Not everything. I left enough for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, Isla's school costs, and the next round of recurring bills. I also transferred money directly to Isla's school lunch account and paid the upcoming after-school fee. Elena watched me. What are you doing? Separating basic finances. You can't just do that. You already did. That money is ours. Yes, which is why I left money for household obligations. I'm not taking your income. I'm redirecting mine. You're punishing me financially. I'm making sure nobody can move my paycheck to your mother while threatening me with our daughter. She sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. This is insane. I said, this is what happens when trust becomes a risk factor. Again, cold. Again, not untrue. Later that morning, I found myself replaying the previous weeks. Carmen asking about my signature. Elena asking for my ID. Lucas saying the hard part is already handled. Raphael calling the loan a formality before I had agreed to anything. The lender email going to the old shared account instead of my primary email. Elena saying, if you would just say yes out loud, none of this would be messy. At the time, that sentence had sounded like frustration. Now it sounded different. I didn't need one magical document explaining everything. The pattern had been sitting around me in pieces. I had just been assuming good faith between people who were already working around my refusal. By noon, Carmen knew the application was under fraud review. She called me 9 times. I didn't answer. Raphael called 3 times. I let those go too. Luca texted, you never wanted me to get ahead. I didn't respond. Then he sent, you could have fixed this with one signature. That one I saved. I still didn't respond. Around 4 o'clock, Beatrice called. I almost ignored it, but she was one of the few people in Elena's family who had never asked me for money. I answered. She said, I'm calling because I'm hearing something that sounds very one-sided. From Carmen? From several people who all somehow use Carmen's exact wording. That almost made me laugh. Almost. She said, they're saying you locked Elena out financially and sabotaged Luca's loan after a fight. I didn't lock Elena out of her money. Did you move joint funds? I moved part of what remained after Elena transferred a large amount to Carmen. Beatrice went quiet. Then she said, why did she transfer money to Carmen? You would have to ask Elena. And the loan? I told the lender I did not authorize a guarantor application submitted under my identity. Another pause. Wait. She sounded different now. Submitted? Yes. I thought they were asking you to sign. So did I. Adrielle, did you sign anything? No. She exhaled. I think we need to talk in person. I said, if your family wants to drag you into this, I'll explain it once. I'm not sending private documents around so people can pick sides over text. She agreed. That same day, I learned why everyone was panicking so hard about the lender delay. It came from Elena, not from some detective work. We were sitting at opposite ends of the couch after Isla went to bed. Elena looked like she had aged 5 years in 24 hours. She said, "There's something else." I didn't say anything. She stared at her hands. My parents already put money down. On what? The equipment. How much? She told me. It was a large deposit. Not enough to destroy Carmen and Rafael financially, but enough that losing part of it would hurt. Was it refundable? Not all of it. And they did that before financing was approved? Yes. Why? Luca found a seller who said they wouldn't hold it. So they committed money first. Elena nodded. And then they needed me to make the financing work. She rubbed her forehead. They thought you would say yes. No, they thought I would be forced to say yes. That's not how they saw it. How did they see it? As helping everyone avoid losing money. I sat back. There it was. The loan had never only been about giving Luca a fresh start. Carmen and Rafael had made their own reckless decision. By the time they put those papers in front of me, my signature wasn't just supposed to help Luca. It was supposed to rescue them from losing their deposit. That explained the pressure. It explained the timeline. It explained why just say yes mattered more than my actual consent. I asked Elena, when did you know about the deposit? She looked at me for a long time. Before dinner. That answer hurt almost as much as the signature. So when your father said they already had money in it, you knew exactly what he meant. Yes. And you still sat there while they acted like I was randomly refusing to help. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. You knew enough. She nodded. For the first time since the argument started, she didn't defend herself. 2 days later, Carmen announced there would be a family meeting. She didn't ask if I wanted one. She told Elena that Beatriz and 2 other relatives were coming over so everyone could clear the air. Elena relayed that to me carefully. I said, I'm not going to a meeting where your mother puts me on trial. Elena said, she's telling everyone you're financially controlling me. Are you telling them the whole story? I've tried. That's not what I asked. She looked away. I said, if they're already judging me based on a version of events that leaves out the application, I'll go once. Elena said, you don't have to bring everything. I looked at her. What does that mean? I mean, this is embarrassing. So was being threatened with my daughter. She closed her eyes. I know. I didn't bring a giant binder. I didn't show up with dramatic folders or copies for everyone. I put a few printed pages in a small envelope. The credit alert. The lender email. My written statement saying I had not authorized the application. Screenshots of Elena's 2:14 a.m. ultimatum. The transfer record showing money moving from our joint account to Carmen. And a copy of the transaction showing Carmen and Rafael's deposit for Luca's equipment, which Elena had shown me from a message thread because she wanted me to understand why they were panicking. We left Isla with a trusted sitter. I didn't want her anywhere near it. Carmen's house was full when we arrived. Beatriz was there. Luca was there. Rafael was sitting stiffly in his usual chair. 2 other relatives were in the living room looking uncomfortable. Carmen started before I had fully sat down. We need to talk about what you've done to this family. I said, okay. That threw her off slightly. She had probably expected me to argue with the premise. She continued. You took a private disagreement between husband and wife and turned it into a fraud investigation. Rafael said, you made a private problem look criminal. I asked, was an application submitted with my name on it? Rafael frowned. That's not the point. It's my point. Luca leaned forward. My equipment deal is probably dead now. I know. You know? Yes. You say that like you don't care. I care that you're in a bad position. I'm not accepting debt because of it. He laughed bitterly. You were finally going to help me, and then you pulled the floor out. I never agreed to help you this way. You knew I needed a guarantor. I knew after the application was already moving. Carmen snapped. Because we knew how you would react. Beatriz turned toward her. What does that mean? Carmen ignored her. She looked at me. You're turning paperwork into a weapon. I reached into the envelope. No, I'm responding to paperwork that used my identity. I put the credit alert on the coffee table. Then the lender email. Then my statement. No speech. No dramatic reveal. Just dates. Carmen looked at the pages but didn't touch them. Raphael said, that doesn't prove anyone forged anything. I didn't say it proves who did what. You reported fraud. I reported that I did not authorize the application. That's the same thing. No, it's me saying what I didn't do. Luca looked at Elena. Did you send his stuff? Elena sat very still. Carmen said, we're not doing this. Beatrice spoke before anyone else could. Did he actually sign it, or did someone send it for him? Nobody answered. Beatrice looked at Elena. Elena. Elena swallowed. I sent Mom some documents. What documents? My ID scan, I said. Elena glanced at me. And an old page with his signature. Beatrice's face tightened. Why? Elena said. Mom said it was just to keep the application moving until Adrielle agreed. Carmen immediately cut in. Elena handled that part. I didn't force her. The room changed. Not because anyone shouted. Because Elena turned her head slowly toward her mother. Carmen continued, too fast now. I told you we needed the documents. You decided what to send. Elena stared at her. You asked me for them. I asked if you had what was needed. You told me Dad said it was fine. Raphael said, don't drag me into this. Elena actually laughed once. A short, disbelieving sound. You were both sitting there when we talked about it. Carmen said, you're the one married to him. You're the one who should have handled your husband. That sentence did what 2 days of arguments with me hadn't done. Elena's face went blank. I watched her understand that her parents were preparing to make her the barrier between themselves and consequences. Carmen wasn't saying, we all made a mistake. She was saying, you were supposed to control him, and if this becomes serious, you handled the paperwork. Raphael followed with, no one would be in this position if you had just gotten him to sign. Elena said quietly, you told me it was only to hold the file. Carmen waved a hand. And if he had signed, none of this would matter. Beatrice said, that's not an answer. Carmen snapped, you're not part of this. You invited me. That shut her up for about 3 seconds. Then Luca turned on me again. You could still fix it. I looked at him. How? Call them. Say it was a misunderstanding. Sign the papers. Let them release the loan. I said no. He stood up. You never wanted me to get ahead. I wanted you to get ahead without putting my name behind debt I never agreed to. You have better credit than anyone here. That doesn't make it communal. Raphael said, no one gets hurt if Luca makes the payments. I turned to him. And if he doesn't? He will. That's not how guarantees work. Carmen said, you care more about numbers on a screen than your wife. I took out the screenshot of Elena's 2:14 a.m. message. I didn't hand it around. I read the relevant line. Sign the guarantor papers by 9, or I'm taking our daughter and the account. Then I placed it on the table. Elena covered her face. Carmen said nothing. I put the joint account transfer record beside it. I found this after that message. Money had already been transferred to Carmen. One of the relatives shifted in her chair. Carmen said, Elena was protecting herself. I asked, from what? From you freezing her out. I hadn't moved $1 before she transferred money to you. Elena said, that's true. Carmen turned on her. Whose side are you on? Elena looked at her. And for once, she didn't answer. Raphael said, this is family money. I said, that phrase is doing a lot of work here. He frowned. I continued. My paycheck is family money when you need it. My credit is family credit when Luca needs it. My signature is family paperwork when the lender needs it. My daughter becomes family pressure when Elena needs me scared. Elena flinched. I looked at her. I'm not pretending you had nothing to do with this. You did. Then I looked at Carmen and Raphael. But my signature is not family property. That was the only line I had planned in advance. Everything else had come out of the documents and the questions. Carmen said, so what now? You punish everyone forever. No. I put the last paper on the table. The deposit transaction. You already made the decision that created the loss. You put money down before financing was secure. Raphael's expression changed. Beatrice picked up the page. You paid this before he had approval? Carmen said, we had to hold the equipment. Beatrice looked at her. So Adriel wasn't just helping Luca. He was supposed to save your deposit. Carmen said, it's all the same family. No, I said, that is exactly the problem. Raphael accused me of enjoying this. I didn't. That's one thing I wish people understood about a clean boundary after years of messy ones. It doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like cutting a rope while people you care about are screaming that the rope was holding the family together. I told them what would happen next. I would not sign anything connected to Luca. I would not call the lender and recast the unauthorized application as a misunderstanding. My credit would remain frozen. My income would remain separate. I would continue paying my share of household expenses and all normal costs for Isla. No one in Elena's family would have access to our financial documents, my identification, or our accounts. Carmen and Raphael would not be involved in conversations between Elena and me about money. And nobody would use Isla to carry adult messages again. Lucas said, so you're just leaving me screwed. I said, I'm leaving you responsible for your own deal. Carmen called me cruel. Raphael called me paranoid. One relative said I was legalizing a family fight. Beatrice asked what exactly they thought I was supposed to do after finding an application under his name. Nobody gave her a direct answer. The meeting ended without resolution. But something had shifted. Before that night, Carmen controlled the story because everyone assumed the conflict was about whether I should help Luca. After that night, the question was different. Who decided they could use my name before I agreed? That question was much harder for them to answer. The loan didn't go through. Because of the review and the missing valid guarantor approval, Luca lost the financing window. The equipment seller eventually moved on. Carmen and Raphael recovered part of their deposit, but not all of it. For weeks, Luca acted like I had personally taken the truck away from him. He sent me one long message about how he had finally been close to proving himself. I read it. I didn't reply. I did feel bad for him. That's probably the least satisfying part of the story for anyone who wants a simple villain. Luca had put real work into the business idea. He had lined up suppliers. He had planned. He had probably been closer than ever before to something that could have worked. But being close didn't give him ownership of my credit. And by the time he texted that I had ruined his chance, he also knew the application had gone forward under my name before I agreed. He never apologized for that. He only kept saying I could have fixed it. Carmen and Raphael were furious about losing part of the deposit. They told relatives I had chosen technicalities over family. Beatrice pushed back hard enough that the story didn't stay clean. She asked Carmen directly why they had committed money before the loan was approved. She asked Raphael why he had called the guarantee a formality if it carried no risk. Most importantly, she kept asking the question from the meeting. Did Adriel sign it? That was the question Carmen couldn't shame her way around. Elena stayed somewhere else for a while. Not with Carmen. After the meeting, she could barely be in the same room with her mother. She stayed with a friend for several days, then in a short-term place while we worked out how to handle things. We didn't separate custody formally. We agreed on a schedule. Isla spent time with both of us. I hated that part. Not because I wanted Elena out of Isla's life. I didn't. Elena is a good mother in a lot of ways. She knows which books Isla likes before bed. She remembers theme days at school. She can braid hair better than I ever will. She is patient with math homework in a way I am not. But for a few weeks, our daughter lived in a world where mom didn't always sleep at home, and both parents were suddenly very careful when the other parent's name came up. One night Isla asked, "Are you and mom mad forever?" I told her no. We're working on grown-up problems. Did Uncle Luca do something? I said, this is not for you to fix or worry about. She asked if Elena was coming home. I said, we're figuring that out. It wasn't a comforting answer. It was the most honest one I could give without dragging her into adult details. That was part of the price. I could protect her from the facts, but I couldn't completely protect her from the atmosphere. Elena and I started counseling. I agreed because she didn't come in asking me to forget what happened. At our first appointment, she said, I sent the ID. I sent the old signature page. I knew he had said he didn't want to be involved. I thought he would understand once it was real. The counselor asked her what real meant. Elena said, once my parents had money in it. Once Luca was actually going to lose something. The counselor asked, so his refusal became less valid when saying no would cost your family money? Elena sat with that for a while. Then she said yes. That was probably the first time I believed she understood what she had actually done. Not just the document. The reasoning. She had treated my consent like something flexible until enough people depended on me ignoring it. Later, she apologized without mentioning her parents. That mattered. She said, I was trying to keep everyone from falling apart, and I decided you were the person who could absorb the damage. I didn't tell her everything was okay. I said, that's what it felt like. She asked if I thought our marriage could survive. I said, I don't know. She cried. I hated seeing it. I still didn't change the answer. That is another thing people criticized me for. Beatrice told me one cousin thought I was being too cold because Elena had admitted she was manipulated. I understand that argument. Elena was manipulated. Carmen had trained her for years to believe boundaries were abandonment. Raphael had normalized bad decisions if the family could paper over them. Luca had learned that someone else would carry the risk. Elena grew up inside that system. But being manipulated doesn't mean you didn't make choices. She chose to send my ID. She chose to send the old signature page. She chose not to tell me about the deposit. She chose to take Isla to Carmen's. She chose to move joint money. She chose to send the ultimatum. Understanding why she did those things helped me decide not to file for divorce immediately. It didn't make me trust her with the same access the next morning. Our finances stayed separate. My paycheck went into my account. Elena's went into hers. We each transferred agreed amounts into a joint household account for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, Isla's school needs, and regular family expenses. No more large transfers out without both of us agreeing. No access to each other's credit documents. No sending identification to relatives. No borrowing for family. No guarantees. No financial discussions with Carmen or Raphael before discussing them with each other. Elena hated how formal it felt. So did I. But the informal version had ended with my signature in a lender file. There were arguments about whether I had overreacted by moving money as quickly as I did. I can see why. If someone looked only at the timeline, they could say Elena moved joint money, and then I responded by moving more joint money. From the outside, that can look like a financial power struggle. The difference, from my perspective, was that I left enough for every shared bill and child expense, documented what I moved, and told Elena exactly what I had done. I didn't cut her off from her own income. I didn't stop paying household costs. I didn't make her ask me for grocery money. I did make sure my paycheck could not disappear into Carmen's account while everyone debated whether my no should count. Maybe I moved too quickly. I can live with people debating that. I know why I did it. Elena eventually returned home, but not as if she had just been away for a weekend. We treated it as part of counseling. Separate accounts stayed. Passwords changed. We started having scheduled conversations about money because random money conversations had become too loaded. Carmen and Raphael were not welcome to drop by like before. For a while, Elena communicated with them mostly by text. Luca stopped speaking to me. That relationship may be done. I am not celebrating that. Isla misses seeing him as often. Sometimes she asks when Uncle Luca is coming over. I tell her adults are working through some things. Carmen still believes I turned paperwork into a weapon. Raphael still believes no one would have been hurt if Luca had made the payments. That sentence tells me everything. Their idea of wrongdoing depends on whether the worst outcome arrives. Mine does not. If Luca had made every payment for 5 years, it still would not have made the initial use of my identity acceptable. A few months into counseling, the therapist suggested we write down our financial boundaries. Not because a signed paper would magically fix trust, but because Elena and I kept having slightly different interpretations of phrases like family emergency and shared decision. So we wrote them plainly. No guarantees for relatives. No sharing IDs or account information. No major transfers from the joint household account without mutual agreement. No using Isla to pressure the other parent. Any financial request from extended family gets discussed privately first. Any future joint credit application requires both people to review and submit it themselves. It was not romantic. It didn't feel like rebuilding a marriage in a movie. It felt like replacing a door after someone had broken the lock. At the end of the session, the counselor slid the printed agreement across the table and said we could both sign it if we were comfortable. I looked at the line with my name. For a second, all I could think about was the lender email, the hard inquiry, my old signature sitting where I had never put it. Then I picked up an ordinary black pen and signed. Elena signed after me. No one was standing over my shoulder. No one had money riding on whether I did it. No one had our daughter at another house. No one was telling me family should make the decision easy. It was my signature. That sounds like a small thing until you have had to prove that it belongs to you. Our marriage is still not what it was before. I don't know yet if that version is coming back. Maybe it shouldn't. The version we had before depended too much on me being easy to deal with and Elena believing she could manage her family by asking me to absorb whatever pressure they created. We are trying to build something more honest than that. Some days it works. Some days Elena gets defensive when I ask a basic question about money, then catches herself and answers it. Some days I hear Carmen's name and immediately assume the worst, which isn't healthy either. Trust didn't come back because we scheduled counseling. It comes back, if it comes back at all, in boring moments. A receipt volunteered before I ask. A request from Carmen that Elena tells me about instead of handling quietly. A transfer we both approve. A week where nobody tries to make me the solution to Luca's problems. My dinosaur sticker mug is still in the cabinet. One of the stickers is starting to peel at the edge. I still use it most mornings. Isla put those stickers there because she loves me and thought my plain mug needed improving. I have no problem with the people I love leaving marks on my life. That was never the issue. The issue was deciding that love gave them permission to leave marks on my credit, my accounts, and my name without asking. I didn't win anything. Luca lost his financing. Carmen and Rafael lost money. Elena lost faith in the idea that her parents would always protect her if she protected them. I lost the comfort of believing my wife and I would automatically stand on the same side when things got ugly. Isla lost a few weeks of normal. Nobody walked away untouched. But the loan is not in my name. My credit is mine. Our daughter is no longer being used as leverage. Our money has rules now. And for the first time in a long time, nobody in Elena's family assumes that if they push hard enough, I will eventually sign. The last signature I gave was the one on our financial boundary agreement. I put it there myself. That's where it is staying. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.